Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and explore something simple but powerful here, how the government teams can take mission-ready critical data, digital twins of virtual any location on demand without collecting new data, and by combining trusted commercial imagery with Skyline's 3D geospatial software through the Nexus solution. So I want to keep the introductions relatively brief here, but I think it's important to introduce Joe Oddie, who's the Director of Partner Strategy at Eagleview. He's going to walk us through some of the Eagleview solutions and the coverage. And Blair Jenkins, the Director of Business Development at Skyline, is going to walk us through some of Nexus and the operational approach that goes into that. My name's Chris Dobell. I'm the Commercial Sales Director at Skyline. I'll be moderating and jumping in on the commercial side. I just want to, as a piece of housekeeping, we are recording this, and we'll go ahead and send this out to you after the call. So feel free to share that after the webinar. For today's discussion, I wanted to go through a little bit of an agenda just to keep on track. We'll introduce Nexus and talk about why this approach is needed. We're going to look at some of the imagery and coverage behind it with Eagleview, and then walk through how it works with a demo and close with how to get started with the Nexus program today. So introducing Nexus, Digital Twins on Demand. At a high level, Nexus is a program that allows you to task location and generate a mission-ready 3D digital twin without flying or collecting new data. It's leveraging existing commercial imagery from Eagleview and applies standardized 3D processing so teams can get usable outputs quickly and securely. That may sound simple, but it solves a much bigger problem that we see today commonly in the industry. Today, we see when we talk to a lot of people, especially on the government teams, we find that the real constraint usually isn't around insights or analytics. The challenge is around access to data. Getting the right data in the right place at the right time is what slows missions down. So in order to solve that, we've figured out that with Eagleview and with Skyline, we can go ahead and take action on these. Now, a lot of these challenges are going to be familiar to the government teams. A lot of times people can't access easily or sensitive or restricted environments. The collection can take weeks or months for these types of environments in some cases. So every flight that involves aircraft or sensors, personnel, and approvals, it can get cumbersome. Even with data that exists, there are cases where we found that data can be fragmented across vendors, maybe even different formats. So teams spend a lot of time preparing and working with data, massaging data rather than using it. The key point is this. In many cases, that data already exists, and that's where Eagleview comes in. They've got a huge collection of high resolution, really high quality and accurate data. And with that, I'll actually hand it over to Joe Oddie to talk about that coverage with Eagleview in more detail.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Well, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Joe Oddie here from Eagleview, and I'll talk to you a little bit about our company. So Eagleview was founded in about 2000 in Rochester, New York. That's where our headquarters is today. And we are one of the premier providers of aerial photography. So when I say aerial, I do not mean drone or satellite, but I mean manned aircraft. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. Eagleview really pioneered the idea of oblique photography. And oblique is like a 45-degree angle from the air of the ground. So a more natural view of what you're used to seeing versus a traditional top-down perspective where you can only see the roofs or tops of structures that you might get from satellite imagery. So that is really that's really our bread and butter. We have been doing this for 25 plus years. So we have over 3.5 billion images in our cloud database that can be served up to Skyline and then created into these very realistic 3D models. And we also provide a whole bunch of data and insights off of our imagery as well. So with all this rich data, we can extract a lot of features and insights from that data through a variety of methods. Right now, we cover about 96% of the population of the country, of the US and Canada. That's primarily, that is where we operate. So basically, wherever there's people, wherever there's homes, wherever there's structures, there's a really, really good chance that Eagleview is going to have a current image of that location. Next slide. So these are the types of images that Eagleview can provide. So first thing I want to call out is the angle. This is the 45-degree oblique perspective that I was mentioning. In our software, we capture 4-way oblique imagery. And that means that if I were looking at this property, I can rotate it around and see the north, the south, the east, and the west to gain a lot of insight about this, including where the entry points and exit points are, attachments to a building, what the additions of a property might be, which you really couldn't tell from the sky, and a whole bunch of other things that you can glean from this image. Also, at the top, it says 1-inch imagery. And without getting into too deep here, that just means the resolution. You can see this is an extremely crisp, clean image. And I assure you, this is taken from an aircraft, not from a drone, at thousands of feet in the air. The 1-inch pixelation the 1-inch imagery means that every single pixel is equal to 1 inch by 1 inch on the ground. So every photograph is made up of thousands and thousands of pixels, and every single pixel equals 1 inch on the ground. So this is the highest resolution commercial imagery available today on the market. Next slide. We're just going to go through a couple of them real quick. These are all 1-inch resolution imagery, and in the metric world, this is 2.5 centimeter. But you can see this water treatment plant. You can just derive a whole lot of detail from that. Next slide. Here's an example of, if you were zoomed out, you may notice that on the left, there is some issue with the road there. You can see some kind of dug up. It doesn't look exactly right. And the fact that you have 1-inch imagery allows you to zoom in and not lose that fidelity. Actually be able to tell the detail from your desk without having to drive all the way out to this location to inspect this. You can clearly see that there's potholes and that the road may need some maintenance. So this is a really big time saver for our customers when using 1-inch imagery to really be more productive in their workflow. Next. And then also for things like you may not be able to see clearly in other types of imagery. First of all, if you were trying to identify a street sign, on satellite imagery, that's not even really possible because of that top-down view only. But when you have that oblique perspective, now you can see the side, and the fact that you have 1-inch resolution, you can actually read what type of sign that is. So clearly it's a stop sign with a one-way attached to it. And again, if you were to zoom in on any location, you can see street markings, you can see drains, culverts, fire hydrants, really anything you need to see, you're going to be able to see that clearly within Eagleview 1-inch imagery. Next. So the big question is, where do you have imagery? Well, here you go. This is a coverage map of our kind of our legacy, or all of our historic library that we maintain through a cloud infrastructure. This is, as I mentioned, about 96% of the population is covered. And you'll notice that there's a lot of open gaps in the West, but that's just, there's less people in the West, and there's a lot more open spaces. But you can see where all the population centers are, including up in Canada. We have very, very good coverage. And on average, we're flying our metro areas about once a year to refresh the imagery. And in the more rural areas, we're capturing 2 to 3 years. Eagleview has built their business on working with state and local government. So as of today, Eagleview has 1,700 plus counties as active customers, meaning we're flying their entire county. So rural Iowa, rural Texas, and all the areas you can see here, we have a lot of coverage, excuse me, of those rural areas. And as I mentioned, we are flying those metro areas about 1 time a year. Notice also that we do have some coverage in Alaska, and we do have planes parked out in Hawaii that are flying constantly out there that we don't ferry back and forth. We just leave them there and constantly are capturing up-to-date imagery out there. And don't get too hung up on the colors. Those just have to do with different sensors that we have, but that you can kind of get a glimpse of our coverage. In regards to the upper right, where it says 100 plus aircraft, we'll go to the next slide. And we do maintain the largest commercial fleet of aircraft amongst all North American vendors. With this huge fleet, this makes us very flexible. We are able to capture about 25% of the country, or about approximately 1 million square miles every single year. And we have the flexibility to take on additional projects as they come up. So if we had a customer that said, we really need a flight of this area or this AOI at this time frame, with 100 aircraft, we have the ability to move them around and shuffle them around to get to those locations and capture that imagery for our customers. Next slide. Awesome. And then we'll hand it back over to Chris.
Hey, thanks, Joe. So this is where Skyline comes in the workflow here. It does require the extensive coverage and scale of coverage that Eagleview has to produce that and can maintain that archival data. Now, Skyline is well known in the geospatial and 3D software space. It's been well known for over 25 years, delivering operational models, supporting government, defense, and public safety organizations. So we take Eagleview's imagery and we are able to process that into those 3D models that we're referring to, and we're going to show you a bit more of in a minute. So in the Nexus partnership, Eagleview is providing that trusted imagery at a huge scale, and Skyline is responsible for making it into accurate 3D representations or operational environments. These are digital twins that teams can actually use, and we can actually help deliver that. So our headquarters for Skyline is based in Herndon, Virginia. We have a number of people spread across the United States and frankly globally. So we have support and photogrammetry knowledge and many years in the industry. And we're able to apply that to people's products. So, when you have challenging sensors or multiple sensors, Skyline is essentially an expert in making projects work and then helping to serve those projects up into environments that teams can use, whether, again, like a government team and stuff, especially when it's large data, it can be challenging to work with. So now that you've seen two pieces of, the components that make up Nexus, I'd like to hand it over to Blair to walk us through the Nexus solution to help understand the problem and some of the advantages that Nexus delivers. So Blair.
Let me try that with the microphone on. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Chris. Blair Jenkins from Skyline. Thanks for the intro and everything to date. So a little more background on Skyline. As Chris mentioned, Skyline's been in the 3D industry, best of breed, world leader, especially in 3D products for about 25, 30 years, embedded with the DoD on multiple programs for at least the last 15 to 18 years. So it's a well-respected, well-used product line across the DoD, Fed government in that space. So it only makes sense to join with a great team from Eagleview and find better ways to get imagery out to our government customers faster. So some of the key challenges that government agencies face, and we see this at various agencies we work at on a day-to-day basis now, is the high cost of collection, tasking aircraft, bad collection efforts from untrained pilots, whether it be droned or aircraft, multitude of non-standard formats, and being able to get it timely. If there's a natural disaster or a world-changing event or a training mission coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks, tasking an aircraft from the military or from any current military contractors to get out, put the aircraft up, fly it, move the data back from the tarmac back to their processing station, and then back out to the customer in a timely manner is very cost prohibitive. It's very heavy lift for everybody involved. Nexus, as designed, is built to alleviate that. It's an extremely cost-effective, streamlined process where our government customers can literally draw a polygon, give it to us. We can confirm they have it. Excuse me. Next slide. Go ahead. I'm probably getting ahead of myself there a little bit. Yep, there we go. It's fast access to mission-ready data from commercial imagery. Again, to Joe and what everybody else talked about, we have a wide and consistent Eagleview coverage across the country. It's extremely cost-effective. Sometimes it can be down to as little as $200 to $300 a square kilometer for the finished product to come out to you. We have an automatic processing pipeline. If our customer, the government, gives us an AOI that they want information on, we can usually respond back to that within hours with whether we have it, when it was collected, what the ground sample distance was. And then from there, it's as simple as picking your product line. What do you want? Do you want 2D? Do you want 3D? Do you want Gaussian splats? Do you want formats? So it reduces the data movement across the entire network. Next slide, Chris. Give you a quick sample of the workflow we have in place right now. Again, Fed Gov, State Gov, Corps of Engineers, Department of War makes the request. We query if the data is available. Something we didn't touch on originally. We have the Eagleview archive imagery, and we can touch more on this if anybody's interested, but we also have the ability to task Eagleview aircraft. If there is an urgent collect, if there's a natural disaster, hurricane, fire, mudslide, whatever, Eagleview is very responsive. You can task an aircraft out to fly a very specific AO extremely fast and very efficiently, and just from years of experience at a fraction to what the government may be paying or doing now for certain aircraft and certain platforms. From there, we can generate a quote. We can output point clouds, 3D mesh, Gaussian splatting, if anybody's familiar with that. If not, we'd be more than happy to go into details on the splats later. True orthos, your more standard products like DSMs, DTMs. If there is LiDAR or bathymetry image available, Skyline has the ability to put that into the mesh model for the output. Obviously, we don't process a lot of the LiDAR here on site, but we do have the ability, if we want to get it from another source and integrate it, that's a function we do as well. As far as delivery goes, we can deliver it via Skyline Globe Server. We'll show you a link to what that looks like here in a minute. It's called a Fusion Link. We can also do outputs in almost any common use format that's used across the enterprise right now, whether it be Skyline's proprietary format, 3DML, 3D tiles, cesium, with Esri, SLPK, IP3S, Unity, Unreal, QGIS. One of the great things about Skyline is we have the ability to convert data to whatever format you're using, so it doesn't tie you to any specific platform. And we can deliver that, again, as an offline kit or as an FTP drive or DoD SafeSend, whatever is the most convenient for the end user. Bottom line, Nexus delivers things in a very timely, very cost-effective way when you need it. Next slide.
Awesome.
I think we're back to demo. So thanks for listening to my speech, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. Just going to let this video play and talk over it for a second, but this is looking at some 1-inch imagery from Eagleview that's been processed already into a 3D mesh in Skyline. And Skyline, we created this fly-through video that we're looking at now. A lot of people in the industry are relatively familiar with the 3D mesh. It's great for certain analysis and can do things like, with volume calculations or area calculations. It essentially gives you a nice representation of volumes in a 3D space. On these, we can run things like view shed analysis, things like property inspection, security and planning and logistics can be run once you have a high quality, high resolution 3D model. In this case, it's a fairly large scale. We're going to move on to this next one. And this is becoming more and more common as a use case that we're seeing. This is looking at the FIFA World Cup that for 2026 that's upcoming, where crowd management and public safety need to do some work on logistics and route planning and as well as property inspection. So we have a number of cases where these in a lot of areas are very difficult to fly with a drone. Let's say the airspace is just a challenge. So Eagleview having the imagery already collected and ready to go makes it easy for Skyline to go ahead and produce the 3D products. More and more, we're also seeing Gaussian splat. It's a newer concept for Skyline and in the industry, but we're seeing more and more use cases for that and how you really get even more benefit out of the Eagleview imagery by using something like a Gaussian splat. I'm going to change my screen over to this other view. We're going to, just one second, I'm going to move you over to another output where we can look at the results right here. So now we're going to switch over. If you can see my screen, we're in Terra Explorer. This is one of Skyline's viewing visualization platforms. And we're looking again at 1-inch data from Eagleview over the Tampa area. This is a convention center. Some of you might recognize this, downtown Tampa. So with the 1-inch Eagleview imagery and then Skyline processing, we've created this Nexus 3D mesh that's displayed of this area. Now, again, a lot of the use cases come in from public safety, needing to do logistics and planning for events that are coming up. This is a perfect application for this Nexus program, and in a predictable short amount of time, you're able to get these types of results. So this gives you the viewer where you can, share and collaborate with your team or run analysis, run measurements on anything you're seeing here, check view shed or line of sight. Should that be the main point of interest. But the point being that, yeah, you're able to actually get more information and more benefit from Eagleview's imagery by creating these 3D geospatial products. And we're very excited about the Gaussian splats that helps resolve things like vegetation, fine structures, catenary lines, poles, things that you might need to measure for some of these things like a property inspection or fine metal lattice structures. So it just goes to show we're able to handle these large amounts of data and able to get them into usable formats that you can then share or stream with your team to collaborate on. So with that, let me stop sharing that and go back to the slides 1 second. Okie doke. All righty. So the next question, hopefully, that you're asking is, how do I get this? And the main thing we would like you to take away with this, and simply to visit, or you can visit our website, or you can go ahead and scan this QR code with your phone or your device, and it'll take you right to our landing page at skylinesoft.com/Nexus. This provides you more information about the Nexus program, as well as an email and a link to go ahead and reach out to us to start scheduling and filling out, like Blair was showing in the workflow, to provide an area of interest and your requirements in terms of resolution you would like and the outputs you would like. And that gives Skyline the information they need to go ahead and run with it. So if you would like for information, or you would like to get a project started today, what we recommend going to this website, scanning the QR code. We also want to mention that next week we'll actually be at GeoInt. So if there's any GeoInters on the call, feel free to stop by booth 1600. That's where Skyline and Eagleview will actually be, and happy to discuss the Nexus program with you in Aurora, Colorado. So feel free to stop by the booth. We're happy to schedule meetings in advance with you. So don't be a stranger. Just reach out to Skyline via this link, and we'll go ahead and schedule some time with you. We'd like to leave some time on today's calls for some questions. So if you have any, feel free to write into the chat. Otherwise, we're available. Feel free to write to us via email, and we'd be happy to engage with you and answer any questions. One thing that I think is important to mention for government clients, if you are looking at GSA pricing, this is something that will align and will be listed on GSA pricing, so you can go and take a look at that to make this, again, a system that's predictable for you, and make it nice and easy to come and scope what you'd like and get the data back from Skyline. So with that, if there are any questions, please submit them into the comments, and we'll go ahead and start answering those. Let me take a look.
I got a couple in there already, Chris. If you don't mind, I'll take a couple of real quick just to give some short answers in there. So Pete asked, what if a customer wants data of a sensitive site or government property? So we actually have a workflow built for that. We have an approved form to get filled out, so we don't have to run around and ask the base commander, the unit commander, and everybody else. We have kind of a one-all form that needs to be executed probably by whatever custodian of record is going to own the data at the end. And that basically alleviates Skyline and Eagleview of any risk that may be associated with it. But it depends on the site. Certain sites are more sensitive than others. Let me see what else we have here. Jorge asked, when you request the data, how much does it cost? Jorge, it's a tough question to answer. We have actually four different models. One is if we task Eagleview to go and fly a certain area, and then from there it really falls down into the type of imagery: 1 inch, 2 inch, or 3 inch GSD. It's just more processing cycles for better imagery. On average, you can plan on between $200, $300, and about $400 a square kilometer for the imagery. Plus the processing fee and things like that. So it compared to other things, we just recently did a very large project for a fairly large base in the South for the Geospatial Research Lab, and that whole base, which is again fairly large, literally came in at, I think it was 3 inch imagery for use with the research lab. It came in at just under $10,000. So, and I believe the total square area was about 500 square kilometers, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. Chris, Joe, remember how big that was? Yeah, top by it was a fairly large collection of a large Army base. Somebody else asked about the data rights. Great question. Data rights. once we make a derivative product out of the base imagery and the government buys it, you own it. It's yours. There are no tiebacks. There are no data right restrictions. Nothing that ties anything. You don't pay any. You don't get any updates on it. Once you buy that kit or that digital twin, it's yours and yours forever. So it no requirements after it's delivered.
I see another question on there. If I need a specific area collected, not covered, or outdated data, can this be done? And I think that goes back to what Blair, you kind of just said. Yeah, you can task a plane essentially through Eagleview, so get imagery on demand in case, yeah, it's not covered or outdated or leaf on when you needed leaf off. And there is standard pricing for that. Again, it'll be listed on GSA, and that's something that we can help you scope. But it comes down to, yeah, again, the area needed, resolution, and the outputs that you need at the end of the day.
And then Jorge asked again.
Sorry. I was going to tack on to that one regarding the custom capture, just to set expectations. Those will obviously take a little bit more time. Imagery that is like already collected, available on Eagleview servers, can be processed very, very quickly, assuming there's adequate coverage. Those can be provided very, very quickly. Whereas if a tasking situation arises, we can certainly do that. It's just going to be a little bit more lead time to get the deliverables right, to get contracts in place, and then to execute the flight. So, and that is very variable depending on, like as Chris said, time of year. Do you want leaf off? What's the AOI? What's the resolution? A lot of factors go into actually flying, but certainly doable.
See a question maybe for you, Joe. Jared Langley's asking, are you collecting 1-inch imagery everywhere or just certain areas?
Great question. So historically, Eagleview has offered our customers to dictate the level of resolution that they want captured. We do not go out and blanket cover everything in the same resolution, because different resolutions have different cost and price points per square mile. So because we work with a lot of government customers, they will dictate. So let's take example, an average county in the United States, let's call it 500 square miles. One county may decide, well, in my major city, or the major cities or the population centers, maybe I want to do 1 or 2 inch. But then in the more rural areas, I don't need that high level of fidelity. So maybe I'm going to back that off to 3 inch or maybe even 6 inch in the real rural areas. So it is going to vary depending on where you go in the country. But I will say that the 1-inch imagery is new as of the last 2 to 3 years, and we are seeing a huge uptick in our customers that are opting in for the 1-inch imagery. So the amount of 1-inch imagery that we're capturing now is more than we've ever done before. And there's no indication of that trend going the other way. Like, it's going to continue that way. And in the future, the only thing we're going to offer is 1, 2, and 3 inch.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Mark, to answer your question about the restricted areas, we're getting kind of into the weeds on what's restricted and what's not, what's collected during normal routine flight operations for Eagleview. We've had deep and long discussions about that. If Eagleview was tasked to fly a White Sands missile range, would we have access to that right away? Probably not. It would take a little higher level of authority to get that one authorized. But in their day-to-day capture that includes a military base or a sensitive site, again, we have a mechanism in place that, again, if the government's making the request that the custodian of record is going to sign for it, then we have no issue releasing that. If it's a targeted specific collect of a sensitive site, that takes a little higher level of authority, but I think you'll find in most of the coverage maps for a lot of the bases around the country, whether they be along the California coast, in Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, you'll find a lot of those collections. A lot of those bases are right up next to large cities, whether it be Fayetteville or Columbus or El Paso, and those bases are often collected as part of the routine commercial capture, and we do have a mechanism in place to get that data out to people if they want it. Over.
Awesome. Thanks, Blair. Jorge, I see you're asking a question about streaming data with Terra Explorer, and correct, I was showing data viewed in Terra Explorer. We have both a desktop version as well as an online version. Both can be used. It's an option for you. We have a lot of flexibility in terms of how to package up and host these large data files to let you then do things with them, like analytics and whatnot, or sharing and collaboration. See,
Joe, I think the next one's on you. The Cardinal views.
Yeah, I'm just reading it here. Yeah. So, yeah, Mark. So, when we flight plan for one of our captures, there is a certain amount of image overlap that is planned. So you're right, we're not cutting grass where one flight line is going to match up exactly with this flight line. There's going to be a substantial amount of overlap, and that's going to depend on the resolution that we're flying for that particular flyover. But that allows us to have no gaps in all of our coverage. And that is actually one thing that we do. So when we get a request from Skyline, the first thing that our teams do is they look at all the flight polygons of the area in question, and they actually verify that there are no gaps. And that is one thing we try really, really hard to do. Obviously, it is not completely foolproof, because a plane in the air is constantly being moved by weather. It's a moving object when you got wind and you're up and down and left and right. But that's why we have that overlap, to account for those things, so that when we have the finished product, you know, just about all the time we do have full 5-way coverage. If, like, when we're actually flying, we can analyze the polygons, were they captured as expected, and if we notice gaps in there, we can correct those while our planes are still on site. So if we're actually, you know, performing a capture, we're very cognizant of making sure we get 5-way coverage of all areas, and that's going to lend itself into a much better 3D model, you know, on the back end.
Jorge, you were mentioning the cost. Yeah, the cost is that you're talking about the cost to stream it through Terra Explorer?
I think that's what he means. And yeah, there is a cost to that, Jorge. So yeah, that's something that we'd be happy to discuss with you. It's a really flexible method to get large amounts of data out. And also, yeah, there is a cost to licensing that. So we'd be happy to go over that with you. We have a number of options. So if you already have an existing platform, we can likely produce products in an environment that you could also use on the other side. But okay. Then if there are any other questions, feel free to also, yes, that is another option, or that's essentially part of the solution here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and we'll reach out to you and get you some more information on that, how that works. But yeah. So like I said, if there are other questions, feel free to reach out to the Nexus link or to any of us individually. Joe, Blair, myself, we'd be happy to answer questions and facilitate, you know, meetings or anything like that. If you'd like to discuss with anybody else on the teams and have other questions, we can go into more detail on and get pricing and anything like that going forward. But we appreciate your time here and joining today for the webinar. We appreciate you listening in on how the Nexus solution is scoped and how it works and how it's going to benefit you and help you with some of the predictability on getting 3D products generated for you more quickly going forward. So with that, thanks guys, appreciate it. Have a nice rest of the day.